So typically on these panels, you usually give the panelists an opportunity to do a little spiel up front and say something about themselves, and if they're in industry, something about their company, and we're not going to do that. Instead, we're going to get right into it. I'll just say very quickly, most of these folks don't need an introduction. Certainly Lieutenant General Bratton doesn't. Space Force S5, S8, there's probably another letter and number in there, but thanks, General Bratton. Go way back. It's great to see you again. Dr. Kelly Hammett, who runs the Space Rapid Capabilities Office, and then Dr. Kyle Yang, who's from Millennium Space. If the three of us fall down, he's got a PhD from MIT. So I'm sure if it's technology related, he's gonna pick us up and help us out. So if you guys are willing, let's jump right in. Now, obviously, you've heard today's panel is about the future. It's about the role technology plays in that future. And that, of course, begs a pretty important question, an obvious question to start. And I love this one. Assuming money was no object, I'm saying to the planner and programmer for the Space Force, but assuming money was no object, what's the number one technology or the number one capability, if you prefer, that the United States needs to gain and maintain space superiority? And I'd like to start with you, General Bratton, if you don't mind.
Yeah, thanks. Hey, and thanks for the afternoon crowd for sticking it out. Way to come back after lunch. Super proud of you guys. It's funny, I'm looking at screens up here, and there's pictures of us, the same thing maybe that's up there, and then the one in the middle is just a thing that says no notes. So we're not getting any help from the technology right here. I'll tell you, the money's always an object, first of all, to be clear, and so we can't pretend that it's not. We got to be realistic about that. But the thing that keeps me up, I think the Space Force is at a place where we can do a lot of things really well, and we've worked through some really difficult problems of, how do we do a thing for the very first time? And we have a lot of things that we're doing for the very first time, especially in the space superiority arena. And so, we huddle the team and we bring in all the sharpest company-grade officers and NCOs, and they solve these very tough problems for us. And we bring in the weapons officers and the test pilot school grads, the AIC grads, and the acquisition instructor course grads, and we got the smartest people, and we can do anything when we crash on it with the team one time. What I worry about is, can we do those things now at scale, in combat, 100 times, in a 24-hour period? I don't know that we need more stuff. I think we have in the pipeline, thanks to really SSC and SPARCO and SDA, the things we need, at least for the near and midterm. It's can we do those things at speed and scale? Do we have the training right that the Guardian crews can execute that task 100 times without it just being, the most recent test pilot school graduates bringing the engineering expertise? We have to be able to do these things in just a repeatable manner. And so, we need sets and reps, we need scale. There are certainly things that we need more of the thing that we already have. SDA sensors being a great example that will enable us to do activities at speed and scale. But that's how I think about that. I don't know that I need a new
There's
anything.
not one black box or anything.
That's right. I need more of the things I have, and I need the sets and reps to do them quickly and in volume.
Great. Dr. Hammett, what do you think about that question?
I like to try to make these events fun, so I'm going to say my first answer would be the money fabricator, so that money would be no object, because of course the programmer is going to say it's always an object, but so I don't think we have all the kit we need. We have some of those things in the pipeline, but we do need it at speed and scale. The obvious answer would be a time machine, because we're behind the threat, and how do we get ahead of the threat? We go as fast as we can, but we really need a head start from a few years back that we don't have. So, all right, those are the farcical answers. Now the obvious answer is artificial intelligence and machine learning, because that's the answer to every question on a technology panel, but that's not my answer. My answer is going to be actually automation. and automation of the front end of kill chains. A lot of discussion over the last couple of years about breaking red kill chains. I've kind of been at the front of talking about threat awareness sensors and knowing that you're even being targeted, because if you wait till the engage phase to know that somebody's coming after you, you're going to lose. So having early knowledge of local and further domain away threats that are tracking, targeting, getting ready to attack you, I think is one of the key technology areas where we have some significant gaps. And then we can't have man in the loop responding to those things because of the speed and scale at which we'll have to respond. So we have to be able to automate some of those things and trust that they can respond on their own when they see that they're going to be destroyed, attacked, threatened, and not have to have guardians in the loop on that. Despite all the discussion of SPA 4Gen and training and all that, yes, but we're topped out with manpower, and that's going to only grow very slowly. So with all the things we do have coming, I think we need to automate and synchronize those things.
We're going to talk about AI a little bit later. There are some potential downsides, Dr. Hammond, so we'll talk about that. Dr. Yang, what do you think about what technology do we need?
Yeah, I would say I'm thinking about the effect that we need, and the foundation for what Dr. Hammond was talking about, of course, is good space domain awareness. And I think that there's still room for innovation to improve our space domain awareness. Obviously, we have some exquisite assets on the ground. If money were no object, I think we could proliferate those. I think that we could have more of them, lower latency from the ground. I think that we could proliferate our space assets. Who wants more GSAPs or whatever it is? And I think that there are other modalities that we could try to obtain for better characterization of objects in space. And then finally, space domain awareness actually doesn't end in space. It actually has to involve cyber domain awareness. And I'm not sure that we really have a full handle on that, and I think that AI and things like that can help there as well. So I think that there are areas that we can innovate in there. So,
Thank you, all of you. Thank you. Good answers. You used the word proliferated, and that gets us into another question: is the proliferation of capabilities we're seeing at low Earth orbit. I like to call some of these capabilities good enough capabilities for the warfighter. Which implies that they're short of being exquisite capabilities, and thus they're theoretically easier to replace, less expensive and easier to replace. And so I'm wondering from the panel, do we see this trend in proliferated LEO capabilities, call them good enough if you prefer, or whatever term you prefer, but are we going to see that continue? And what's the upside to that continuing? And something we don't often talk about is there a downside to kind of throwing our eggs in that basket? And so, General Bratton, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I think we'll, there's incredible value in proliferated LEO. I think we'll see proliferation, go beyond LEO for sure. I think, sort of a layered orbital approach gives us another resiliency attribute that's valuable. So, you don't want to have all your spacecraft in one orbital regime to ensure delivery of capability during conflict. I think this idea, of how do we think about replenishment as a concept is something that we need to really get after and think through, probably with some wargaming. What does that look like in conflict? How realistic is it? Can you, do we have a traditional reserve like you would see in other capabilities in the air or land domain that you hold back and then put on orbit?
Like a civil space fleet?
Certainly could be civil space fleet, could be, I know we've talked a lot about just common bus and plug and play sensors that you plug in the one you need and you put it on orbit. Certainly General Saltzman talked about the Victus Nox mission. I mean, we know we're on the cusp of this capability. It really goes back to what does that look like in conflict? How much of it do we need? What's the military utility? When's the right time to give us military advantage to employ that capability? All those things that I think we'll get after in wargaming, and certainly I think we'll talk a little bit about Futures Command and the task ahead of those guys to answer some of these questions for us. But is there value there? Absolutely, there's value.
Is there a downside, though, do you think?
I think if you, I think as long as you maintain that resiliency attribute based on the threats that you're facing, and you're building your architectures with that in mind, you can defeat any downside. If you go, all in on PLEO, I mean, that feels pretty high risk given the threats we're facing today.
So I think there are some other downsides, and I'll just go there because I think General Bratton did a good job of talking about upside. The one thing he didn't say is price point, right? If you can mass produce, you can get things more affordable, and you can have coverage and capacity for things like internet, like we're doing with Starlink and other things. We should really have Nick probably come up here and answer this question because somebody gave this to me secondhand. But the complexity of managing the constellations becomes one of the major downsides. And this number will be wrong. Somebody told it to me. Nick will give us the right number, but somebody told me in the first year of flying Starlink, SpaceX did over 150,000 conjunction and maneuvers automatically again, right? So back to the automation technology piece. So the fact that you've got so many LEO birds in this very similar orbits, crossing each other, and back to having not good enough SDA, you might think you're going to have a conjunction and require a maneuver when you didn't really. But if you don't have highly accurate low latency data, you're not going to know that for sure, and you're going to err on the side of sophistication. So what if you don't do that? Well, then maybe you have some collision events and you produce all kinds of debris, which is cascading into a very full proliferated constellation, and then you put a whole bunch of other assets at risk. So I think those are the two main downsides: is if you get too congested, too full, and you lose control of knowing whether you're conjuncting and going to have to maneuver, you could get into a pretty ugly LEO environment. And then, of course, we war gamed some of this a few years ago. You can block your access to the higher orbital regimes, because you're trying to get through a trash belt where you've got hundreds of birds potentially, throwing debris into LEO, and you've got to try to punch holes through that to get to the other orbital regimes.
Fantastic. Dr. Yang?
Yeah, and as the provider of the Victus Nox spacecraft that the General mentioned, I'll say that was a tremendous effort to get that up in space and meet our 60-hour, launch timeline, 48-hour activation window and whatnot. And it did come at I don't want to say a cost, but there's a human manpower resource, right, to having to have that ready to go all the time. So if we were to actually need to maintain that 24/7, 365 to do that, and if we had a bank of satellites in the back ready to go, then obviously, at least my company, we need to be structured and sized for that. And we were structured and sized to do it, for this particular contract. But so that's the downside, that if we actually need to do quick replenishment, it probably is an industry-wide thing. Then we need all partners to be engaged with that, because probably not any one of us is sized to do that. But that's the downside, but at the same time, that's the strength of the United States, is because we have breadth of capability, right? So we can turn that difficulty into our strength. So, yeah.
Fantastic. Thanks, all of you. Great answers. All right, now this one's I'm gonna let you off the hook, Gov, and let Kelly go on this one, because he's brought up automation a couple times now. So, but really, you can't have a discussion on futures and technologies without talking about AI, artificial intelligence, and ML. And to that point, we're seeing, industry is investing in these capabilities quite a bit. I hope you guys in the government are seeing that, but it's true. In KBR, I can tell you, we're not just beds, beans, and bullets downrange. We have a pretty healthy national security space capabilities, and we too are looking into how we can deliver to the government on this. But some people, and this is where the rub is, Dr. Hammett, some people would say it's a double-edged sword, going too far on automation. And so, my question is, how do we take advantage of these capabilities without waking up Skynet, or going too far on this and completely removing kind of the man or woman in the loop?
Okay, so a couple things. It was in the news, I think, just this week, but there is this thing of, lawful use of weapons, proportionality, confirming targets. At this point, tends to require a human in the loop to legally push a button to to activate a weapon. That's going to be debated here for the next several years. From my perspective, and we had an SSC-sponsored reverse industry day on artificial intelligence a couple years ago, and I went there, and what I said is, in order to be able to do this, you really have to fundamentally change the way you test and verify requirements. By definition, an artificial intelligence system is learning and morphing and changing, mappings of inputs to outputs, and so the current ways of doing like information assurance, where you have to list every line of code, and you can't do that, right? So you have to figure out how to put wrappers around things that tell you the system can perform, but it doesn't turn into Skynet. It doesn't escape the boundary of safety or risk or decision authority that you're trying to keep it into. And that's going to be the key. And again, people aren't really thinking about that yet that I've seen.
So it's about the requirements more than anything in your mind, is setting those boundaries, build the box to operate in up front.
Right.
Yeah, okay, good. Anything, Dr. Yang, on this? Or?
I think the one thing I would add is when it comes to automation, where I really like to see machine learning go, and in terms of new technology, is I'm worried about the threat and the cyber threat and them already being in our systems and changing our data when we need it most. And so I wonder if we can somehow have the AI also be helping us sense them, defend them, and things like that. And if there's a way to do that, this is not my specialty, so I can dream up anything I want. So that, I think, is the area we're going to get attacked in first, before anything kinetic, right? So.
Great. Well, let's move on. I'm going to let you off. Did you have something you wanted to add? Or?
Well, I was going to say, look, I was downrange for a long time, and KBR runs a great chow hall down there.
Thank you.
And my
Thank
buddy
you very
Ken
much.
Clark had 10,000 cheeseburgers sitting in the one in Baghdad. So don't undersell what KBR brings to the fight.
Yeah. I ate at those chow halls too. Look at me. Can't you tell? So this one's for you more than the other panelists, General Bratton. But obviously, the Space Force is looking to the future. So much so, we're standing up a Futures Command. And so what is this command going to do for our warfighters and specifically for the industry folks in the audience here? What can we do to help you with the Futures Command?
Yeah, I'd love to hear, what does industry expect from it? But I'll tell you a couple things going on with Futures. One, Dennis Bythewood's now in the Pentagon running the Futures stand-up team. Doing a great job, and they are in, as hard as it is a stand-up organization, they also have to do work while creating the organization. One of the dilemmas that we face, and have faced for a while, is there are so many good ideas out there. It's really sussing out which ones of them matter in the fight. There's lots of good things that we should do or could do, but it's what's the game changer that gives us military advantage in conflict. And that's where, our scarce dollars have to go. And we haven't had a great process for really sussing that out. SWAC has done tremendous work through Battle School and other forums to really get after the architectures we need. But, flying off to capabilities in the electronic warfare, orbital warfare kind of arena to determine, hey, if we can only buy one thing, buy this one because it's going to win the war for us. A level of rigor in our analytics to back up those statements and make those determinations is what I think General Saltzman is looking right at Futures Command to do. And then that comes to the S5 team, and we take those architectures and turn it into requirements and shepherd that through the process ultimately into the objective force and a fielded force for Spock or others to operate. I think Futures pointing out of all the things available, of all the technologies, of all the ideas, here's the gems that win the war for you. That's what we need from those guys, and I have no doubt they're going to take us there.
So Futures is going to take over force design? Is that what I'm hearing?
I think Futures will absolutely be the leading edge of force design. They're gonna say, I don't want to. I'll put everybody to sleep if I start talking about the process associated with it. But they're going to point out the winners. And the winners are going to make it across the threshold into the objective force that is the result of the force design. So they'll try, test, war game everything, and then they'll make the determination on, okay, these are the things that the Space Force needs to go forward with. But we got to keep you know, we were having this discussion earlier. We got to keep the futures guys focused on the future and not drag them into, you know, what I think.
You don't
is
want
the
them writing
current fight.
requirements.
That's right. That's
Yeah,
right.
Yeah. Now, just one quick follow-up for you then. And so you mentioned war games. Are we going to see a new series of games, or do you think is Schriever still going to be the biggie, or what are we going to do there?
Yeah, I think absolutely we're still committed to Schriever. It serves several purposes, you know, really working out things with allies and partners. I think we need more than just Schriever, and I think, you know, Del 10 has already been leading us there under STARCOM, and I think we'll see that just continue to grow under Space Futures.
Awesome.
Hey, Dan, so you covered 2/3 of futures. The part I care about is the last one, which is technology, maturation and demonstration and prototyping. So before coming to Space RCO, I was at AFRL for 13 years. We stood up this thing called Strategic Development, Planning, and Experimentation. Gave us a prioritized set of requirements from the headquarters to go do that tech mat to TRL 5.6, and then organizations like Space RCO can go grab it and put it in programs. I don't want to be in the tech maturation business. I want futures to give that demand signal to the DoD labs so that it's ready for me to harvest for programs.
Yes. Anything to add, Dr. Yang? If not, I'm giving
I'll
you
say
the next one first. So.
One thing on this, just to add real quick, industry, I think, as a whole, would love to be involved to the extent that we can, more involved in the development of these exercises and the whole S&T process, for that matter. I'll mention also one thing we're delivering for Colonel Davis, who was sitting here a few minutes ago, is high fidelity digital models of the space vehicle and whatnot, and we think that helps with these kinds of exercises. But then, just to be involved with what are we going to break in the system for the exercise? I think we'd like to be part of that.
Is there? You don't have to answer this if you don't want to, Gov, but is there a physical location planned for futures?
No, I mean, we'll go through the basing process, you know, in accordance with the Department of the Air Force regulations, blah, blah, blah.
Good policy answer. We'll make a policy guy out of you. Hey, so this one, we'll start with you, Dr. Yang, if you don't mind, but, General Saltzman's long lamented the need for our Guardians to have a warfighting mindset, to have advanced training, to have a range to do that training on. And as an old graybeard space operator myself, my experience, good, bad, or indifferent, has been that training sometimes, when you get a new system, is an afterthought. And so, keeping those things in mind, Dr. Yang, how do we break that cycle and get into a higher level of fidelity for training our Guardians?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Dan. I think I'm probably preaching to the choir here, but we can think of examples in our history where we don't have realistic training and testing. If we think back to, for instance, the United States in World War II, we go into the war without ever having really tested our torpedo as a whole. We've tested the detonation system, we've tested the propellers and everything, but we've never tested it as a whole. So when we go into Battle Midway, our poor guys are dropping their torpedoes and they're exploding when they hit the water, and none of them actually, or very few of them actually, go on to make their way to the target. And so we need to find ways to do training and testing in as realistic environment as possible, and if possible, the actual environment, right? And we've seen examples of that on the ground. For instance, we saw earlier today talking about bringing the airmen, Guardians, to various facilities like MIT Lincoln Lab to work with radar operators, get training there. We've seen other examples, such as the Space Force had Tetra 1, which is a satellite that we developed and trained over 250 Guardians on in space. And I think having those assets is critical. They're follow-on Tetras, and that's great. And so we need more of those, and they need to be tested in the actual environment. And that's the key thing. It can't just be, as much as I just touted the computer simulation that we had and that we're delivering for Colonel Davis. I'm sure if we had computer simulation in World War II, those torpedoes would work great. But they didn't work in the real world because there are unknown unknowns that we have to face. And until we get out there, we just don't know what they are. So we've got to get out there and train.
Dr. Hammett, you look like you wanted to say something.
Yeah.
By the way, General Bratton was cutting eyes at me, so he wants to say something
Okay.
too, I think, when you're
Couple three things really quickly, and so build on what Kyle was talking about. So there is this capability at Kirtland Air Force Base with the Space Test Program, Space Experiments Review Board, where you can fly things like Tetra, and you can turn those into training assets. That's one of the biggest shortfalls we have. We don't have a range, we don't have aggressors, we don't have actual systems to test with realistically. So that's one option that we're working with, and probably pre-decision on. I better not say that it's a decision, but some discussions about futures coming in and having a presence there at Kirtland to do some of these things. And Gov talked about strategic basing action. We're talking about Delta 11 coming to Kirtland, range and aggressors. So we can go from the lab to test to real systems. And I guess the last piece is when we're building things, we're setting aside training assets. So we're delivering remote modular terminals right now. We're giving a couple of those to the range. We're building software to control orbital warfare assets for Delta 9. We're going to give them the real software. Don't go build a simulator of the software, use the software. And we can put it on experimental ops floors where Guardians can come test and train. And I think that's going to be a winning plan if we can get it all laid flat.
Yeah, I think I'll just add all that. So, hardware to the operators, to the aggressor and range teammates, absolutely. To Delta One, absolutely. I think on the capturing the requirement early, so we're not delivering a system without the training systems needed, to bring Guardians up speed, make system operational. In the process now, SWAC has been the writer of the architectures, and they create what we call a capability area design, but it's a document that is, here's the architecture we need to fly for missile warning. The companion to that the Futures Task Force is working on right now for AMTI is a capability enabling document. So that captures, hey, here's the training pipeline, here's the changes in curriculum, here's the facilities, the entire .mil-PF structure. Those two documents go hand in hand and come to me at the S5 to turn into requirements. We've done a great job in the past of the architecture requirements. Here's what you need to put a missile warning capability into space. But all those other things is where we've fallen short. And we have tried, over the years, not through lack of will, Air Force Space Command tried to get after this several times. We've just never put the two together and sort of wedded them. In order to declare a system IOC or fully operational, you have to have all the .mil-PF stuff. So at least in the documentation side that I own, we're now capturing that in a way that we haven't before. Time will tell, hey, is this successful? I think it will be, but the proof will be, when the Guardians actually get a training system with the operational system.
Is that a service internal document, or it's going through the joint system?
These some, depending on the nature of system, some will go through the JROC process, some will stay service internal, just depending on which path it's taken in the acquisition side.
Great. If there's any questions from the audience, feel free to step up to a mic where I can see you. Otherwise, we got about 5 minutes left, and I do have one last question here. I'd like to finish up talking about the threat. Everyone in this room, and certainly everyone on this panel, shares my concerns about the proliferation of counter space capabilities by our potential adversaries. If you just look at the numbers of capabilities, apples for apples, oranges for oranges, one might perceive that we're in the hurt locker when you just look at the sheer numbers. But General Saltzman's spent quite a bit of time thinking about and talking about this idea of competitive endurance, and so that's how we can prepare for a conflict in space, or hopefully prevent it. So, given that kind of setting, what keeps you guys up at night thinking about this threat, and are we doing enough? What else can we do? General Bratton, if you...
Yeah, I think, and it gets after, General Saltzman walked through the space truce this morning. I think this defend the joint force from space-enabled attack. The whole world watched Desert Storm and saw the U.S. use space-enabled attack to just absolutely smash our adversary. And they all said, that's a good idea. We want some of that. And now they built it, Russia and China in particular. And so now we have to defend against that capability that we had in Desert Storm, Desert Shield, and since. We have to be able to defend that, and the burden of that is on the Space Force. We have to defend the joint force from space-enabled attack. We have to take those capabilities away from our adversaries and protect those soldiers, sailors, airmen, marine, guardians, the terrestrial forces from space-enabled attack. Because the adversary is using space to find the Navy, to find the Army, to find the Air Force, and attack them. And that cannot stand. That is why one of the reasons why the Space Force exists. And so we got to defeat them in the domain. We got to use space control to gain space superiority. Our ability to do that right back to at speed and scale. We can't do that one time. We got to do it 100 times in the opening days of conflict. Delivering the capabilities fast enough to enable Guardians to do that is what I worry about. Do we have the resources do we need? Are we putting it in the right place? That's what keeps me up every night.
Do you think, has the mindset and the culture changed for that warfighting mentality?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. That is, mindset and culture is not the problem. I think Guardians are ready to tear it up. It's the resources and the capabilities, and probably the biggest burden right now really is on the force mod community. I mean, the pressure on them to deliver the warfighting capabilities also at speed and scale is incredible. And I think, hats off to the MLs and SMLs out there, the PEOs that are just crushing it every day to get this stuff in the hands of Guardians. Got to go faster, but they're getting after it.
Great. Dr. Hammond, anything to add?
Well, that's where I live every day, which is why
this is in your wheelhouse.
Yeah, we were kind of aligned to this earlier, so I don't think there's really anything to add except to come back and reemphasize some of the points I made earlier. In our programs, we don't want to be maturing technology because that takes too long. We want to be harvesting mature technology, so we have to be smarter buyers and be able to evaluate proposals and technology to know it's real and whether we can do it, and then we have to go fast to bring it speed and scale, and that is hard. That is hard. And you asked, has the mindset changed? I'll say in the service, yes. In the combatant command, yes. Administration, we don't know. We had some issues with this current administration. We had a little bit of a pause on some policy issues. And so those policy issues still have to be addressed with. We'll have a new administration. We'll see what they come up with. That could either accelerate us or slow us down. Hopefully it's an acceleration, since this administration coming back started the Space Force.
I'll just say real quick, what keeps me up at night is I think that our potential adversaries have a higher risk tolerance than we do, that they are willing to fail and fail fast. And let's face it, that's how you learn the most, is from failure. Success is a poor mentor. Fail fast, and then learn. I mean, think about, it was somebody in the audience can correct me, Discoverer. I mean, how many times did we not catch the film canister? I think it was 12 or something like that. Could we do that nowadays? Have 12 failures in a row and keep the program going? So that's what I'm worried about, is that I don't know that we have the risk tolerance that our adversaries do, because their OODA loop is a lot faster than ours, because they're willing to fail and move on.
If you read between the lines with what Dr. Hammett was saying, I mean, I agree with you. That's a very valid point. And so that's probably part of the pause is, it takes, it takes quite a bit of approval to use some of the capabilities that we have, right? So, listen, great answers. Really enjoyed the panel. I hope you all did as well. Could we have a round of applause for these amazing gentlemen? Thank you, everyone.
There was one question, I think.
Oh, hello. Is this thing on?
Yeah, go for it. We have time for one.
Awesome. Good afternoon. Major Ariel Stark here from Air Force Tactical Exploitation of National Capabilities. I have a couple of questions in relation to what has already been asked here. So regarding the ability to replenish what's kind of already on orbit, my question is whether or not we're looking at any technology that we could, that has the flexibility to take on submission sets even after they've already been launched. One such capability that I have in mind anyway would be software-defined radios. Is that something that we're trying to ensure are readily available on orbit almost every time we launch, maybe?
Yeah.
I'm going to say absolutely, yeah. So software-defined radios for sure. There are others. Some of the SAML stuff, space access, mobility, and logistics, is more to be developed. But there are pilot efforts, there are lab efforts of being able to reconfigure physical hardware, but certainly software we want to be reprogrammable on orbit, and we're doing a lot of work in that area all across the service.
Anybody else to add to that? No? What was your second question? Did he answer enough?
Yeah, absolutely, that is enough. And then if it's okay, I do have one more question.
Go for it.
So as we
Wherever
stand up
you guys
our
started.
Space
Just tell me, get
Futures
the hell out there.
Command, I'm wondering if there's going to be a responsibility to coordinate amongst the acquisition forces within the Space Force and elsewhere to ensure that when Space RCO is building a prototype and they find all of these lessons learned, that they are applied across those other agencies, and so that, again, we are not limiting the use of our resources and ensuring that everyone learns from what Space RCO or other rapid acquisition organizations are doing.
And maybe roll in the integrated mission delta as part of that. But.
Yeah, I think on the Space Futures piece, I mean, absolutely what we need Space Futures to do is look across all the S&T and demo organizations, you know, DARPA, SCO, AFRL, within the existing program offices, and sort of, you know, one, create the opportunity to share lessons learned, like you're talking about, but also to, you know, sort of be the arbitrator of winners and losers. There's a lot of good ideas out there, but not all of them are going to be game-changing in conflict. And having some rigor in the way that we take things from demonstration and S&T into the objective force against some measurable either wargaming analytics or a validation function, and then communicating that back to those, you know, not just the DoD entities, but industry as well on, hey, here's what we're looking for. Here's what we consider military utility in this use case. And this is why we think this technology over this one, or this concept over this one. I think that all lives in the wheelhouse of Space Futures.
Anything on the integrated mission delta with that, General Bratton, in terms of acquisition working with ops?
No, I think the IMDs, I mean, General Grant, General Miller's team, as they're moving forward with that, that absolutely creates a forum for shared communication between the communities. But also, I think it lets us accelerate, do things at speed with that, you know, kind of tighter feedback loop from the operations community to the force mod community.
Do you have a third?
I thought I was done, man. I was ready.
No, not at this time. Thank you for that response,
Thank you.
sir. I think
All right.
we're in good hands.
Great question.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Now we get to that.